YouTube and welcome back. I'm Nicole Martin and this is Making a Mortgage. This is today's 10-minute take. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. If you like what you see, the button is below. And our goal here is to make every homeowner knowledgeable and give you information to help you understand the mortgage loan process. Today, we are talking about appraisals. Now, the appraisal is the bank's valuation of the property you're seeking to buy. So when you go and find a house, you've gone around with your realtor, you found the house that you have fallen in love with, and the seller has it listed for a price that you're comfortable paying. You agree to pay that price or some price that you negotiate, and you guys have come to an agreement that the seller will sell it for this dollar amount and the buyer will buy it for that dollar amount. Well, the appraiser is the impartial third party. He's hired by the bank, and he comes to the property to evaluate it in the context of other properties that are similar in style and condition and location, etc., to ensure that it's worth the value that you all have agreed upon. Now, sometimes I have buyers ask me, well, can I pick the appraiser or do you pick the appraiser? How does that work? Well, the appraiser is designed to be an impartial third party. So even at the bank or the mortgage company, we don't know who the appraiser is until after the report is done. It's designed that way so that the appraisers are independent and we have no influence. We don't have any way to influence them on the value. So what happens is the loan office will go to a third-party website and we say, hey, we need an appraisal for 123 Smith Street. We give the appraiser all the information, the listing agent, the buyer's agent, the contract, and the appraiser goes to the property and he writes his report. He then says, yes, this property is worth this amount, or it's worth more, or it's worth less, or the property is worth the dollar amount you've agreed to sell it for if you do these things, if you make these repairs. So there are basically three ways that the appraisal can come back. It can come back on value, it can come back over value, it can come back undervalued, or it can come back subject to. So let's look at each of those three areas. So on value means that the property is worth whatever you have contracted to sell it for. So let's say you've agreed to pay $300,000 for a house and the appraiser comes back and says, yes, $300,000, this house is worth that dollar amount. Undervalue, if you've agreed to pay $300,000 for a house, that by you, I mean the buyer and the seller have agreed to pay that amount, and the appraiser comes back and says, no, it's only worth $290. Well, then you have a couple of options. I like to tell people that that reopens negotiations. It does not automatically mean that the seller has to drop his property value. If the property value comes at $10,000 or any dollar amount under what you've agreed to pay for it, what that means is the bank will only loan you the appraised value. So you can either go back to the seller, ask them to reduce the price to the appraised value. You can make up the difference, so the bank will loan you $290 in our example, and you bring the other $10,000 out of pocket. That's perfectly fine. Or the seller has the option to take the property off the market until he believes it's worth the $300,000 he's asking for it. So if the property comes back as under appraising, it reopens negotiations, and it's not an automatic the seller dropped the price. The third option is it comes back over value, which means you would be buying into equity. So in our example, if you've agreed to pay $300,000 for a house, the appraiser comes out and says it's worth $320. Nothing has to change with the contract. It's just that you are buying a property with $10,000 worth of equity. If you're interested in understanding what equity is, leave a comment below and we can do a future video about equity. The final one is subject to. So in this event, let's say you've agreed to pay $300,000 for a house, but the appraiser comes out and he says, okay, the house will be worth $300,000 subject to a list of repairs. And sometimes that is bathrooms need to be completed or a heating system updated or something else, but any number of things can be the subject to for an appraisal. In that situation, what happens is the buyer's agent has to go back to the seller and say, okay, the value came in okay for the appraisal if you can make these repairs. And in that situation, the seller would have to make the repairs prior to closing, and the bank will send the appraiser back out for what's called a final inspection to make sure that those things have been done. I had one come in this week where the appraisal was subject to finishing of finishing to install the bathrooms. It was a basement bathroom that just didn't have a toilet, didn't have a sink, didn't have a vanity. So he said, yeah, the property is worth what you've agreed to pay for it as long as you finish that bathroom with normal fixtures and finishes. Now, the other piece about appraisals that is sometimes interesting to people is what happens or how does the appraisal function when you're buying using a 203K loan. Now, we will do a future video on the 203K loans, the FHA 203K, because they're quite popular and I actually really love them. I enjoy the 203K. But for this the purpose of this video, let's stick to the function of an appraisal in a 203K loan. What happens with the 203K is you are buying a house and you are also borrowing money to repair that house. Well, the appraiser comes out before you purchase the house. He's going to ask to see the purchase contract, the contractor's bid, and whatever repair, if there's an FHA consultant involved, the FHA consultant's bid as well. And what the appraiser does is he says, yes, this property will be worth what you've contracted to sell it for as long as you do these things. So it's important in a 203K situation to sequence your service providers such that you have the contractor's bid before the bank orders the appraisal, so the appraiser can see what kind of repairs you're planning to do so that you have a higher likelihood of getting the value you're looking for. Again, this is Nicole Martin with Making a Mortgage. Thank you for hanging in there with us, and we will see you next time.